Hello and welcome to Ditching Hourly. I'm Jonathan Stark. Today I am joined by guest Alastair McDermott. Alastair, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Jonathan. It's great to be here.
I was thinking before the show that you had been on before, but I think you haven't. I think this is your first time here, and what I'm remembering is being on one of your shows.
Actually, run two of my shows, Jonathan. So yeah,
Okay.
yeah, we've talked a bunch of times, but yeah,
Yes.
it's great. It's great to be on this show for finally. I've been listening to this for a long, long time, so
Oh,
it's good,
good.
good to be on the show.
That's great. Well, today we're here to talk about your new book, Use AI, Stay Human, a survival guide for experts who want to stay relevant, authentic, and indispensable in the age of AI. So I'm really excited to talk about that. But first, could you tell folks a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, cool. So, background, like I think a lot of people listen to your show. I have a techie background. I was a software developer for a corporation for years. I left them in 2007, started my own business. Fumbled around for a long time trying to figure out. I sold SEO as a service. That was the first thing out the gate, because it was kind of hard for a system software engineer to find some way of running a kind of their own business, their own agency, and
Yeah.
so I went through the I went through the whole process of being there, done that, bought the T-shirt in terms of making every single business mistake you can possibly make, um, and yeah, so I eventually ended up with a business, an agency called Website Doctor, and I kind of knew that I wanted it to be more of a consulting business than an agency. I didn't really want the agency model; I wanted the expert consulting model, and so that developed and that eventually developed into a brand called the Recognized Authority, which some of your listeners may know because you've been on the Recognized Authority at least once, if not twice.
Hmm.
And so what I was doing was I was helping people who were invisible experts to become known as a recognized authority in their field, which is something I kind of feel passionately about. And and when all of that was happening, at the same time, I saw this kind of incoming tidal wave of AI, and I was thinking, if I continue down this road of just talking about building authority, and I don't acknowledge the AI piece, it's like sipping martinis on the beach with the tidal wave oncoming. So I decided, okay, I've got to understand this. And I've got an advantage in that I have a techie background, so I can understand a lot of the technical aspects of it as well. And so I rebranded the business completely from Website Doctor and the Recognized Authority. All are now under Human Spark.AI, and that's the name of the brand. And what I do is I help people. Particularly, I love helping experts to use AI and to become super productive with it.
Awesome. Okay, and I think I saw a LinkedIn post about the book, which is, and I jumped on either that or an email, and I jumped on and I said, "Hey, let's get you on the show right away." So, tell folks a little bit about the book.
Yeah, so I think one of the things is that I think there's a lot of people are threatened by AI, and I think like it's right to feel a little bit of that because it's just disrupting everything. But at the same time, I think that for true experts, AI can be like a force multiplier rather than a threat. And I think that it's a false choice to say that you should use AI or not use AI. And if you use AI, you're not being authentic, you're not being credible. I think it's possible to stay a credible expert and still use your own human judgment and your own human relationships, but use this amazing tool that we have to I'm trying to stay away from all the cliched words like amplify or all of these horrible overused words now, which is part of the problem that we have with trying to use these things. But to use it to help us to get our word out, to be more scalable without becoming a spammer, but actually creating high quality content that's based on our codified expertise, which is something that I think AI can really help us with.
Do you mostly recommend using it for marketing reasons or also delivery and creation of IP, those sorts of things? Is it sort of like a holistic approach
Oh
that you
yeah,
have for it?
I think marketing is probably one of the weakest things that we can use it for. It's not bad for marketing, but there's so much more that we can do with it. And I think like I see kind of four different opportunities that we can use for AI, and one of those is productivity, and that's kind of table stakes. Everybody talks about using AI for productivity, and like don't get me wrong, it's really great for productivity. You can get a huge amount from it. I've done some projects where we saw like 10,000% ROI and things like that. Reducing a 2 hour process down to a 5 minute process.
Right.
That kind of stuff is possible to do. But there's other things that we can get from AI. Like, for example, apart from just productivity, if you think about it in terms of capabilities, so AI can give us extra capabilities that we simply didn't have before. So, like as a business, you have the capability maybe to deliver something that you couldn't deliver before, like for example, design components, or an app, or some sort of web-based access to whatever it is that you have. You've got the capability to deliver new things that you didn't have before. So you as a business can now do more. And then there is smarter decision making. So in part, that could be simply using AI systems to help us make decisions, in part by just like telling them about decision making frameworks and getting them to walk us through it. It's very simple, and I built a bunch of free tools to help me make decisions. I put some of them out there. If anybody can go look up my name on ChatGPT, can find them. But you can actually get it to walk you through a decision and give it the background and say, hey, can you help me figure out which decision making framework, because there's tons and tons of them, would be best to use here. And then as well, we can also give it data. So we can give it specific data, and we can say, can you help us make the decision based on this data that we have? So you're making smarter decisions, you've got more capabilities, you're more productive. And then the last one is accelerated learning. And we can learn things, particularly for experts. And I think this is where we get superpowers as experts, subject matter experts using AI. If you're using AI at an expert level as well, you kind of have this superpower. So yeah, like you can tell, I'm really passionate about this stuff because I I really love the positive sides of this. And like, don't get me wrong, I understand there's tons and tons of negative sides to AI as well, and like I'm not unrealistic about that, but I think that the positive sides of this and what it can do for us are just amazing.
Mm. Well, I love that your focus is specifically on experts, which is the audience for this podcast, and you're being one yourself. How have you used it? Like, what are some examples, maybe from those list of things where you've used it? For example, how did it play into writing this book? I'm sure you used it quite a bit.
Yeah, so I use it in a very nerdy way. I used VS Code, which is Visual Studio Code, and I used a plugin called Rue Code for that, which allows you to connect up AI to Visual Studio. So Visual Studio is a coding environment. It's just a way of editing text files. But one of the nice things about it is it has built-in versioning, so you can have version control through a tool called Git. I don't want to get too techy on it, but basically what this allows us to do is it allows us to have like version one of a file and version two of a file, version three of a file. And now when we can connect that up with AI, we can say, hey, I want you to, rewrite the fourth paragraph in chapter two. And then we can see the before and the after. Because one of the problems that we have with AI is quite often, you'll give it some text, you'll ask it to make a change, it'll make that change, but it'll also make another change that you didn't realize.
Mm.
And that goes unsurfaced until
Yeah.
later when it's problematic.
Yeah.
So I really love having version control around AI,
Hmm.
and that helps a lot. And then one of the really cool things about this type of system is like what you can do with it in terms of setting up these kind of agentic systems, which are when you can give AI different personalities or different modes. And so, for example, in the system that I have an orchestrator mode, which is like the kind of the book editor in chief, and that orchestrator then commands these other modes that I have. Like I've got a fact checker mode, which can check for facts. I've got a mode which is just for rewriting into my voice.
Hmm.
I've got a mode which is quite extensive, which is actually a beta reader mode.
Hmm.
So the beta reader mode actually has a file associated with it that defines five personalities of five different beta reader personalities. And what it does is it reads the chapter one by one from the context of this synthetic beta reader. Now, I'm not
Mm.
saying it's as good as a human beta reader, but if any of your listeners have ever written a book, trying to get feedback in a timely fashion from beta
Yeah.
readers is a nightmare.
Yeah.
So, actually being able to programmatically get five different perspectives from five different beta readers, albeit not human, but that
Mm.
doesn't mean that the feedback is not useful. And that allows me then to have a conversation. So I'm able to have a conversation with my editor and say, hey, I think we really need to update this chapter, with whatever it is, the point that we're focusing on, because the feedback, and you can also ignore the feedback if it doesn't feel quite right. But that allows me to go from having a concept to a draft chapter to feedback on that chapter, and back again, in hours instead of in months, and that makes
Mm.
a huge difference just in terms of productivity and everything. But having those systems and thinking about how those systems work together, I think that's a really core skill.
Mm. Okay. So let's get a little bit more techy. It's a lot of software developers listening. So what how are you orchestrating this? Is it VS Code? Is it scripts that you're writing? Are you
Yeah.
just do you have the orchestrator say like, okay, just do this stuff?
Okay, so VS Code is plugged into a system. Sorry, has a plugin which is a system called RuCode. RuCode is like an open source version of Cursor, which a lot of people are using. And
Mhm,
what I like about it is it's open source. I've given feedback on some of the bugs and stuff, and they've actually incorporated them already, which is really cool.
mhm,
So I have a system set up where I have within my book project, I have what's called a custom modes file, which is a .ru modes and .roo modes, and in there you can define the modes or the different kind of personalities that the AI can take. And so within that, I have an orchestrator mode, and the orchestrator is not allowed to write to files. It can only read files and give commands to kind of sub agents, and the sub agents then can act. So, for example, the rewriter, which rewrites something into my voice, if it comes across some text that the orchestrator has told it, hey, go rewrite this, it's able to do the rewrite into my voice, and it has a specific set of rules. The beta reader mode is not allowed to write to files except the beta reader feedback file, so it can
mhm,
only write to that file. And so I can run a beta read, for example. It'll update that file, and then what I can do is I can say, okay, let's triage the feedback that we've got, let's prioritize it, and let's look at what we need to do in the context of, because ideally you're going to want to write for one single reader ultimately, but
mhm,
having this feedback from different perspectives is useful. And so I say, okay, so would our ideal reader feel the same way as, so for example, one of the beta readers I always use is like a hard-nosed veteran who's a little
yeah,
bit cynical, because I
mhm,
think it's really good to have that perspective reading the book. And so sometimes I'll ignore what the hard-nosed veteran will say because they're a little bit too cynical about things. But sometimes that perspective is really useful as well. So
mm.
that's just kind of like, I can go more detailed than that, but I think that gives a good overview.
Well, let's zoom out a little bit, for people because a lot of people I talk to in my orbit probably are going to write a book or their first book, or maybe write another book. They've already got
Mhm.
one, and you've written a few books before this.
Yeah.
So, what what did you give it at the very beginning? Like just a table of contents, and you
Mhm.
said start this. How did you train it on? How does it know what your voice is? So those like how much traditional writing did you do before you set the AI agents loose on it?
So you were a contributor to the book because you were on my podcast, the AI Powered Thought Leader, and so I did a podcast about a year and a half ago now,
Mhm.
and I was kind of examining, like I knew that okay, at that point we were very early on in this AI revolution, and like I thought, like it's not that we don't know the solutions, we don't even know the problems at this point. So I was trying to figure out, okay, what are the problems that we're fitting, we're going to hit here. And one of those was like you and I spoke about, we may have to redefine the word author because it's going to mean something different.
Yeah.
That was something that we talked about. And I think that's still in the book. Like that's still like one of those things where, say, like we do have to think about that. But I still did take a kind of a traditional approach um, to gathering the knowledge. I had conversations with real people and thought about it a lot. I have in the book a photo of my handwritten notes with a lovely glass of Danish beer because I was in a hotel in Denmark. My partner was at a conference and I went along as just a kind of just like, okay, I'm going to have a little working
A
holiday here
plus
away.
one. Yeah.
Yeah, plus one. Yeah. So I was working on this, and so a lot of my notes were handwritten at that point. But
Mhm.
but then I brought them into conversations with AI. And when I say conversations, I mean literally voice conversations. I would be driving from the west of Ireland up to Dublin on the east coast, and so I'd be in the car for 3-4 hours, and I would chat with advanced voice mode or regular voice mode back in the day, and I'd have a conversation. Okay, I'm thinking about doing this. What, like, how would that work? Would that be a good flow? Now,
Mm.
the other thing that I did, I think is super important, was I actually codified some of my knowledge. So I have some very specific knowledge that I have from talking to 200 people like you, really smart experts in your field. In fact, I would say that well over 50% of the people that I've spoken to on my podcast have written at least one, if not more than one book. So I have a
Mm,
lot of knowledge about book writing from my own experience and from other people's. So what I did was I started to document that. I started documented as like a framework that I could then say to AI, hey, I want to make sure that when I'm writing a book, that it follows this framework. So this kind of general structure. So I don't care about books that aren't kind of educational focused, single problem business books. That's the only kind of book I'm probably ever going to write. I'd love to write a
mhm.
sci-fi. Must talk to you about how you get on with your sci-fi, but
Yeah.
I think that I'm going to only write those types of books because that's what I'm good at. So I
Mhm.
decided to codify my implicit knowledge, and I think that this is something that experts can do with AI. Is we can say, here's all the things that I think about this, or even better, here's some conversations I've had with other people about this topic. Let's say I was on a podcast. I take all the podcast transcripts where I spoke about that topic. I put that into AI and I say, can you pull out the implicit knowledge that I have that maybe I don't even realize that I have, the things, the
Right.
frameworks and insights, and then start to codify that. And so I did that for book writing. And
Mhm.
then I gave that to AI and I said, now I have these notes, I have this framework, and I have this approximate outline. Let's talk about actually turning this into a plan for the book. And it kind
Mhm.
of like one of the things I love doing with AI is mashing several sources like that together and saying, what can you come up with? And then using human judgment, which
Mhm.
is the really irreplaceable thing, to actually look at that and say, okay, probably need a little bit more of this, a little bit less of that, you know? So yeah, I don't want to monologue too much, Jonathan. So let me know
No,
if
no,
you
no,
want to.
this is perfect.
Yeah,
So, my experience has been and I use AI every day, I use it a lot,
yeah.
and, in a lot of the ways that you've already mentioned. One thing I've noticed is that it can quickly generate a massive amount of stuff to read.
Hmm.
So, when you wanna bring that human judgment into it, I it's almost like I wouldn't say more work. It's a different kind of work, but it's still a lot of work to go through and sort of review it all. Or like I'll find stuff. I'll go down a rabbit hole and I'll think like, wow, that was really interesting. Kind of like I use it a lot for brainstorming. So like just check my logic on this. What am I missing? Are there any holes here? And it gives me answers. And sometimes I agree with them. Sometimes I don't. Sometimes they're totally stupid. And sometimes they're like, oh, that's a really good one I wouldn't have thought of. And then I can't find like, how do you keep it organized? Like, I can't find where what the insight was. I almost want like an AI to go through my ChatGPT logs and be like, "Okay, find all the stuff that's garbage and all the stuff that I liked." Or I mean, it gets unwieldy pretty quickly if you use it a lot. So, but I'm just using default interfaces. So I'm not using any APIs. I'm just using like Claude and ChatGPT and a teeny bit of Gemini. But in the normal chat mode, I haven't even used, like, the project stuff.
Okay, so here's a couple of tips that might be useful. So first off, I think it's super useful to make some kind of meta knowledge documents about your business. And so I created a bunch of here's my positioning, here's our ideal target audience, here's our services, here's our pricing, here's our marketing material. You know, the whole website goes in there, and um, not quite raw, but with some meta commentary around it to explain it.
Mhm.
And then I use that. So I have one which is called Human Spark Coach. So this is internal; nobody else can access it, but I can talk to it, and it already has the context. Because one of the most important things is giving it that context.
Right.
So I actually have that meta information version controlled in Git. So I have I don't have it on GitHub because I didn't want to go that far for privacy reasons, but I have it
Mm,
all locally here in Git.
mhm.
And what that means is that I can then update that, and I can kind of see it as it progresses over time. And you know, quite often there's an evolution of your services, your positioning, things like that. So having that meta information is really useful. I also have codified things like if I'm writing a LinkedIn post or um, a blog post, I have a lot of that process already pre-built into a custom GPT. So, for example, I can say, okay, I have this idea about this topic. and I'm thinking about writing a blog post on it. Can you just talk to me about that? And quite often I'll use the dictation mode. I'll just be speaking into my iPhone, and I'll
Hmm.
hit go, and it'll process that and then come back to me. And then I say, okay, that's the outline of the blog post. Now give it to my blog post writer, which writes it in my voice. It puts it in there, and now it's got what I said, but it's now much tidier. And I say, okay, that looks good. Let's change this, do that. And then I say, okay, fine. Now give it to my prepare blog post for publication. And what that one does is that one actually writes WordPress friendly HTML, nicely formatted. And it also gives me meta tag suggestions, regular, just the comma separated tags. It gives me the SEO meta tags. It gives me the 5 suggested titles. It gives me, I have a separate one which gives me 20 compelling opening hooks, but that
Hmm.
one suggests 3 or 4 compelling opening hooks that might be better. And
Hmm.
so it just gives me all of that back. And I eventually built this into a single web app which can go end to end doing all of those things. I don't tend to use that because I'm quicker just using the ChatGPT interface to do it.
Yeah.
Um, but like you can, like you can vibe code an interface to do all of those things one by one as well if you want to. Um,
But how
but
are you? You said you have one give it to the other one. Like, what does that actually mean?
quite often in ChatGPT, that's just typing like the at sign and the GPT name.
Oh, so
And
these are all
these are
GPTs that you
90
created.
percent of them are custom GPTs. Yeah, I
Okay.
really like the custom GPT interface and how their GPTs work. I don't always like their models the most. I mostly like Claude, but I use it the least because quite often it's just simply not available. As in, it's totally rate limited, or it just throws an error. So I actually recently stopped using Claude altogether because of that. I use Gemini 2.5 Pro for maybe 60-70% of my work, and then I use ChatGPT, and I have the Teams version of that, so I can share it with my assistant, and we can share the internal GPTs across that. And then the other one that I use sometimes is Google AI Studio, and that does train on your data, so you have to be careful what you put into it. But with that one, I like that you can set a thinking budget in terms of token numbers, and you can also set a temperature. So I like to be able to lower the temperature to get more reliable, consistent output on some things.
I've never heard anyone say temperature. What's that?
Okay, so temperature is a setting for language models, and it basically controls the um, level of probability or creativity. So one is usually the default. If you put it up to 2, it's going to go super creative and start hallucinating all the time. If
Mhm.
you're working on something where you don't want it to hallucinate, in fact, you want it to be really accurate but possibly less creative, then you might want to put it down to 0.5 or 0.3. So I
Mm.
kind of typically run with zero 0.6, 0.7 for most things. If I'm brainstorming, I'll probably want it up at 1, 1.2, something like that. So it's
Mhm.
just one of these kind of creativity, hallucination to less creative, less hallucination kind of sliders.
Mm.
But it's not exposed quite often in the interface. You will see it if you're using the API. You can set
Mhm.
temperature on that. So it was one of those things that kind of I think AI folks behind the scenes know, but doesn't tend to get exposed to the end user much.
Right. Okay. So let's zoom out a little bit. So that for the ideal reader of this book, who's I'm going to say almost definitely not as deep into the technical aspects of it as you are, and probably aren't going to start off being that complicated.
Mhm.
Maybe the experience that. Well, you tell me who's the ideal reader for the book. What's their level of experience with AI?
Um, I I think that it's somebody who is a subject matter expert who is curious enough to have that kind of mindset of wanting to learn more. Like the analogy that I give people is, I think it's a bit like learning to drive. Most people should probably learn how to drive a car, um, but if you're a subject matter expert, being an expert in using AI is a superpower. It is got this multiplying effect, and I think that you can go to an extent where you're not just learning how to drive, but like you're learning how to drive a race car,
Hmm.
and so it doesn't mean you have to be able to build the engine, but you become like you're able to master the machine more, and so it's for people who want to do that, and like you can take it to any level you want. Like you can install VS Code and set up the APIs yourself. Or you can pay, 30 or 40 bucks a month to Cursor and not have to worry about the technology part, and just use the basic interface. Like, it depends on which way you want to go. There's lots of different kind of levels of technical expertise that you can choose. But
Hmm.
I do think that this as a skill, being able to understand and use and know the limitations as well, but being able to use these AI systems, particularly these agentic systems where you've got one passing control to another, I think that level of AI usage and knowing how to orchestrate these systems, I think that it's just one of these things that is potentially revolutionary for a person as an individual and for a business if it's a business leader.
Right. Yeah, like maybe like the idea of just learning how to use a spreadsheet, 30 years ago or something like that. It's like
Yeah.
you should really learn how to do that if you're going to be running a business, that's like a very useful skill, like very useful.
Mhm.
And this is like it's almost a joke to compare this to spreadsheet AI and spreadsheets together, but I tend to agree with you, especially in the expertise space. Let me ask you this: if the AIs are so good, what do we need experts for anyway?
Because AIs make mistakes, and AIs, it's not that they can make mistakes, which they always say is they definitely will make mistakes. And like, this is where the expert has the advantage. I mean, people who are junior who don't know when it's giving them the right answer or the wrong answer, they're at a serious disadvantage now. Whereas people who are actually experts in their field and know instinctively when they see something, oh, that's right or that's wrong, that gives us something to build on. And so yeah, it makes mistakes. Like, there's problems and around bias, there's problems around power usage and things like that as well. Absolutely, you got to think about those things too. But what I will say is that, as an expert, your expertise and your judgment is the thing that gives you the credibility. Your relationships, all of those things are things that AI can't do. And it can fake empathy, it can't do real empathy, but unfortunately neither can a lot of humans. So so but I do, like, there are certain things that AI can allow us to do that we simply could not have done otherwise. And it if you use it properly, it can make your work much higher quality, and it can give you those extra capabilities that you simply wouldn't have had before.
Yeah, that's been my experience as well, where I've got, um, you know, hundreds of students and people who contact me and regularly, and a lot of them, it's a polarizing topic. Some of them are super anti AI, other ones are super pro AI. Most people are kind of in the middle. Used it for certain things. They use it on their Zoom calls. Ever seems like everybody's doing that now. It seems really good. Hardly ever comes up with something that it hardly ever hallucinates or makes things up. And you were just on the call, so you can read it and be like, "Oh, this is right."
Hmm.
So there's certain things that it's certain very specific use cases it's really good for. I've had a couple. It's happened a couple of times to me where someone would say, "Hey, I was asking ChatGPT about something, like how to position my business, something like that. Something that I spend a lot of time, I've been doing for years, something that they haven't been spending a lot of time doing."
Hmm.
And it'll give them this response and they'll say, "What do you think?" And I'll be like, and I'm reading it and I'm like, this is great. This is
Hmm.
like so good. But the person who actually did it can't tell.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like there was another one. It was like, how would I come up with a marketing plan for a business? Here's my website. How would I come up with a marketing plan for this business? And it was a long marketing plan. There was literally nothing I could think of to improve on it. And there was nothing wrong. There was no hallucination. There was no bad advice. I was like, I was like, I can't improve on this. But the takeaway here is that the person got the information, in my opinion, an A plus marketing plan for their business and couldn't even see it
Yeah.
because they didn't have because they're like, um, they're like I don't want to say junior employee. They're just not an expert, and it takes that judgment to be able to say like, oh, this is good or bad. This is insane. This is totally wrong. But especially as a soloist, I find it really useful to have something to pitch ideas to that is a reasonable facsimile of sort of it just allows me to like think out loud almost, but with my
Hmm.
fingers instead of my mouth. It's extremely useful for me for certain types of things, but I'm always bringing that judgment in and saying like I can tell the difference between what's probably a good, what has a high probability of success and what is absolutely stupid. And most of the times it's giving you s- middle of the road, pretty good. It's usually pretty good. It's usually
Hmm.
not horribly bad. It's not usually amazing. So I find it really useful as a soloist, but you can't, the judgment has to be there. Otherwise, you're just gonna use it. And like imagine if I said, oh, give me a report on War and Peace. Like I
Hmm.
never read War and Peace. It just gives me a report. I wouldn't know if it was right or wrong. It could completely have made something up. So it's just like without the expertise there, you don't know how much weight to give the thing that it gives
Yeah.
back to you.
So one of the issues there. So one thing that you can do to inoculate against that is you can cross check.
Hmm.
So if you say, "Hey, this is a summary that Claude gave me, Gemini, can you tell me if it looks right of War and Peace?" Right? You can do that, and you're dramatically increasing. I'm not saying it's going to be 100%, but you're going to be like five nines probably that this is correct. That's one thing that you can do. The other thing is the more that you use it, the more you start to understand when it is and is not going to make a mistake. And I think that like the only way is to put the reps in terms of using it. And so you start to again, it's this kind of instinctive knowledge thing. It's like as you use it, okay, I probably haven't given it enough background context here, and
Hmm.
so it's probably going to misunderstand something. Maybe I should have worded that better, or maybe I should have written a more structured prompt
Hmm.
instead of giving it like a very conversational prompt. Particularly if you're doing stuff over and over again, maybe you want to take the conversational prompts and actually turn them into structured prompts and maybe add some knowledge documents as context, so that
Hmm.
it'll do whatever you need to do in a more repeatable way. So that's something that you can do that can help with that problem. And sorry, then I lost my train of thought.
Well, I've got a question for you based on that though. So I'll have like a really long coaching call. Like maybe last week I did like a real deep dive with somebody on their productivity systems and it took 4 hours. We were on the phone for
Hmm.
4 hours and I got a transcript of it. And I basically did a one person workshop with this person. And I was like,
Hmm.
I want to pull out the frameworks. Like how did I walk through that?
Yeah.
It made sense to me at the time, but I couldn't like recreate it in my mind,
Hmm. Oh
like it would
yeah.
have,
Yeah.
you know. So I was like, go through there, pull out the system and see, I just wanted to see how interesting it was boiled down. And I was two things happened that were unimpressive.
Hmm.
One was it didn't pull it was like didn't it did a terrible job. Like it was completely wrong and incomplete.
Hmm.
And I said, well, this is wrong and incomplete. Like, why is this wrong and incomplete? And then it said, oh, well, the transcript was too long. I could only read the first quarter of it. And
Yeah.
I'm like, well, that would have been useful to know, before I started interacting with it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, how should I have asked you to do it so that you read the entire transcript?
Hmm.
And it was like, oh, well, I'll do it, I'll reprocess it now and I'll do it like this and go through it.
Yeah.
And that is super frustrating that it silently fails.
Hmm. Well, I tell you what might be more frustrating is it'll tell you that it's going to do it right the next time, and then it doesn't.
Yeah. So
because
okay,
because what
let's have some horror stories here. Yeah, keep going.
yeah, what these machines are doing is it's artificial intelligence. It's not real intelligence. And what it's doing is it's giving us the most statistically plausible answer to the request that we give it, no matter
Hmm.
what that request is. And if that request is, can you tell me why? It's going to apologize, because that's statistically what happens is it apologizes and then it says, oh, I'll try and do it again. Because and it doesn't have the mechanism to do it again necessarily. It might, it may have, but it probably doesn't.
Hmm.
So like this is one of the super frustrating things. It's baked into the technology. Like they are stochastic parrots, some people call them.
Hmm.
Now, just because all it is it's a probability token machine, just because that's all it is doesn't mean it's not useful. But
Yeah.
it does depend on knowing how to use it right. You know, it's I liken this to somebody saying, this drill is terrible. All it does is it drills holes. I was like, well, that's
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 what
what
it's
your
built
drill
for.
does. Yeah. So if you need a hole, then it's great. But yeah, the there's a couple of issues here. So one is a 4 hour transcript is gonna be a lot of tokens.
Yeah, it was about
Transcribe.
50,000 words.
Yeah, so 50,000 words. Yeah, so if you were using Claude, you might just about have got away with that, but probably not. If you're using Gemini 2.5, you might have got away with that, and it might have worked in Gemini. Do you remember which one it was you were using?
I think it was ChatGPT.
Yeah, yeah. So I think that the token limits in ChatGPT won't cover that. If you tried that same thing in Gemini, it'll probably work better. Now, the other thing I would say is that if you give it a more structured prompt, rather than just typing in whatever is off the top of your head at the time, if you give it a more structured prompt and structured instructions, um, that will help. So what I mean by that is, so we like I tend to think of like three really basic categories of prompts. One is a simple one, like summarize this text or translate this to French. That's a really simple one. Then there's conversational, which is and I do conversational all the time in dictation mode. What I like about conversational is you can ramble away for 2 or 3 minutes and give it loads of context. But that is, hey ChatGPT, I was just on a coaching call and I'd really love for you to go through and pull out all the key insights. Oh yeah, and also, can you see if there's any frameworks? And I would literally say it like that.
I do. That's how I say it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Now that's good, but if you're doing this in a repeatable way, like let's say you want to transcribe every single coaching call that you have and always have it give the same format, and then
Mm,
maybe it feeds it into an email system where it emails automatically to the client with your generated notes. You might want to have a more thought go into that. Now, one of the great things is we can actually use AI to structure our prompts better. So
hmm
I have a free, I've about 70 or 80 free tools, by the way, in the GPT store. If you look up Human Spark, but one of those is a prompt creator, and you can say, "Hey, here's my prompt. Can you help me to make this better?" And
mm,
it will just take your prompt and restructure it and reflow it a bit to work a bit better. Now, one of the things that we learned recently from a research study from I think it was early this year was that there seems to be two types of ways that the neural network large language models work, and one of those is based on instructions, and the other is based on what they call demonstrations in the paper, which basically means examples. So if you give it not just instructions but also examples,
hmm
you're like almost doubling the amount of brain power it's able to give to your task. So if you can
Okay.
give it instructions as well as examples, that will really help. And that will you'll get better results out of it. There's lots and lots of little tweaks like that that you can do to help you get better results. In this case, I think the biggest thing is the context window, which is the amount of memory, viable memory that it has. You probably would be best off in Gemini for that task, just for that.
Well, so before when you were talking about, giving these different, like the operator, I think you said, the editor, GPT, you give it like a lot of context and context is really good, but doesn't it send all that context every single time that you're, like how do you do that in a way that doesn't uh overwhelm, what did you call it, the token window or whatever it's called, like its
So
memory?
okay, so there's a few different things. So like I would start a new chat for a new task. If it's not related to something previously, then I would start a new chat.
hmm
The other thing that is really useful to do, some people call it compressing context, which is where it takes the context and it basically summarizes it and starts a new chat based on that. I have a prompt that like it's a prompt template, which I call Project Sync, and what
mm
it does is it actually does it it takes that context and it summarizes it in a particular way. I'll tell you what. I'll just give you a quick flavor of what it does because it might be useful.
hmm
Um, it says generate a comprehensive project or chat summary that can be easily referenced in a new project. That clearly explains all aspects of this project and conversation to my business partner, who is also a software engineer. The document should be enough to thoroughly bring them up to speed and enable them to contribute effectively. Now, there's lots more, but I just want to give you that kind of insight
Yep.
because I don't have a business partner who's also a software engineer. It's just that I wanted to capture the business aspects and the engineering aspects because those are the two aspects of the conversation that I want to capture. So
This
that's
is really smart. Yeah. And then you take that and you start a new chat with
start a new
that.
chat. Yeah. And it
Okay.
usually has enough context at that point.
That's really good. That's really good because I find myself, I'll originally start by, I'll put in like this, like, oh, I had a kickoff call with a new coaching student, like pull out all of these things, this list of things, like what are potential positioning statements for this person? What's their product ladder now, or what could it be? What to dos, and for whom? What are the next steps? And then format it in this way. And and then it'll say something like, it'll be like, "Oh, do you want me to make a marketing plan for the person?" Something like that.
Hmm.
And I'll be like, "Sure." And then like the thing that all I really wanted to do was take the transcript and like have this summary document, like a detailed, specific kind of summary document.
Yeah.
And then I'll go down this rabbit hole, and I kind of do want to stay there because it has the context from the phone call. And then, but then I'm like, now I'm kind of off in a different direction,
Yeah.
and I'm like down a rabbit hole,
This
and
this is one, by the way, where Google AI Studio is really useful. Um, and the issue here is Google AI Studio trains on your data, so you can't put in anything confidential or client
mhm,
information.
yeah,
But it does give you the ability to branch from a conversation. It also
mm.
gives you the ability to delete previous context.
Oh, that'd be so good.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's really nice for that, and that's why I use it for some stuff where I don't care about the confidentiality stuff, and it's find it really useful for that. Like I put in my white papers. I've got a bunch of white papers on AI adoption, and so I put those in, and I use those to kind of like when I'm working with corporate clients. Those are It's really useful for me to have conversations with those, and then I might just delete that or branch it out into a new chat. So yeah, that's really useful. I put the project sync into the chat here in the system that we're using to chat. By the way, Jonathan, you feel
okay.
free to
Oh,
send
I
it out
see.
or use it again. Send it to people. Um, I've got some other
Cool.
ones. Like one that I always like to say is there anything surprising or insightful you can tell me about approaching this problem, especially that
Right.
I might not have thought of already? That's a really nice one. Another one I like to use is please ask me a series of focused questions about this topic one at a time to gather the information we need to move
Yes.
forward. And then,
Right.
where helpful, offer a numbered list of realistic answer options for quicker responses, otherwise allow for open-ended replies. So what it'll do is say, okay, we could go forward, here's three options, you like any of these, or tell me what your option is, and you could just go through this numbered menu, and it'll
Yep.
generate this. So those are like really simple things, but they'll just get you in, they'll get you moving on something. But ask me
Hmm.
a series of questions. Like I did really solid positioning statement for my business about a year and a half ago now. I did it on a live stream in 15 minutes, and I said,
Yeah.
I want you to ask me a series of questions about my business and my positioning in order to create a really good positioning statement in this format. I help these
Hmm.
people solve this problem by doing this so they can do that. And I
Hmm.
just gave it that. And when now, here's the thing, I knew the positioning statement format that I wanted to use. And this is where
Yeah.
expertise comes in. If you
Yeah.
don't know that, then that's where the expert has the advantage here, because you know how to ask the right questions, you know what looks right, what looks wrong. Um, yeah, so there's a bunch of ones like that that I find really useful. Now I have a very simple way of documenting my prompts. The ones that I use all the time, I turn into a custom GPT, which is basically just a structured prompt with a name and some knowledge documents, like some text documents or something like that attached to it, so it has some context.
And
Uh,
that is in ChatGPT specifically.
yeah, I use those in ChatGPT. You can also do it in Claude as projects, and you can do it in Google Gemini as gems. ChatGPT has the best kind of interface for using those, and they seem to be the smartest about using the context.
And they're
Uh,
local, you said.
Yeah, and then I just have a simple shared spreadsheet that I have for myself and my assistant, and we can both copy paste. So that's where I copy pasted this one for you out of, by the way.
Mm,
So I just have, it's just called my AI prompts, and I just click on that. And I can go find something. So I have a bunch more. I'm not going to give you them all, but I have a
yeah.
bunch more in there. Like one of those I like to use is, say, I want you to put on the persona of our ideal target client. Um, and I want you to picture the project that we're doing. Would this person say hell yes or meh or you about this, and whatever it is that we're working on? And so you
Hmm.
know that sorry, I've forgotten the name of the guy now. CD Baby. Isn't that who wrote the?
Oh, Derek Sivers, yeah.
Yeah, I think it was hell yes, or no. I think he basically talked about that. Yeah. So like this is one of the things I would use for quality control of the book. I created a tool, by the way, on ChatGPT, which is a free. If you look up hell yes on ChatGPT, you'll find it. But basically, you can put in any like here's the target audience. What would that target audience persona think of this? And so I run a chapter of the book by it, or a subtitle, or a title, or a design, and say, would they like this? And it'll say hell yeah, or it'll say no, they wouldn't like this, here's why. So
Mm,
that can be really helpful as well. So look, Jonathan, I know,
wow.
sorry, I come on like here, I get very passionate about this stuff.
Well, I'm looking at the clock. I know we have to wrap up. So, um, where can people go to find out more about what you're doing? Sounds like you have a ton of tools on the website or built into ChatGPT. So, where's the best place for somebody to perhaps take advantage of all this time that you've put in making yourself an expert in this area?
Go to humanspark.ai and look up my name, Alastair McDermott, on LinkedIn. I'm very active on LinkedIn. Love to connect with anybody from your audience.
Cool. I mean, you gave me a bunch of great tips, and like, duh, I'm just kind of smack myself in the head. I have a keyboard shortcut thing that I use for like tons and tons of things, and I don't have any prompts in there,
Oh
which is
yeah.
stupid because I have tons of prompts that I use all the time. So,
Yeah.
just immediately after this, I'm throwing in a section for AI prompts, and there'll be probably I could pull a dozen that I use on a regular basis.
I'm going to give you one more, Jonathan.
Yes, yes.
When you're doing this or anything, talk to ChatGPT and say, I want you to create a hyper efficient workflow that uses the 80/20 rule to do this thing that I want to do. And it will help you shortcut all the parts that you don't even need to do.
Nice. That's right up my alley.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for coming on, Alistair.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Cheers.
All right, folks, that's it for this week. I'm Jonathan Stark, and I hope you join me again next time for Ditching Hourly. Bye.